Well, good afternoon. Well, here we are again for this edition of the AARP Massachusetts Fraud Talk Tuesdays. And we're here on the second Tuesday of each month from 12 to 12:30, where we discuss a different scam and how you can protect yourself and your family from becoming victimized. My name is Jim Alder, and I'm a volunteer with AARP Massachusetts. And our guest today is Alice Diamond, and she is also a volunteer with AARP Massachusetts Speakers Bureau. And today we're going to talk about elder fraud and exploitation and how scammers target older Americans. This presentation is being recorded, and we'll send you a link to the recording along with the slides and a list of the links to resources. And if you have any questions, please put them in the question and answer at the bottom of the screen. Alice, good morning. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Thanks for being here. Where would you like to start this discussion of scams, specifically targeting seniors?
I want to start with a story that took place last month here in Massachusetts. A woman is facing multiple charges after she was accused of defrauding a 95-year-old woman of about $150,000 while working for her as a personal care assistant for 3 years. It was a report by the victim's daughter who told police that a review of her mother's will led to the discovery that the scammer was listed as an alternate executor of the will. She said she then discovered that her mother's home was in foreclosure due to a reverse mortgage, of which her mother and their family members had no knowledge. And then they learned that $120,000 was withdrawn from her mother's bank account, which included $70,000 paid to a construction company for work that was never done. Financial exploitation comes in many forms, and older adults are often victimized because scammers may perceive that they're a soft target or an easier target because they may not be seen as being as sharp as they used to be, or because they're much less technologically savvy. And let me mention that, seniors are in all different places in terms of their abilities and their technological know-how. There are a myriad of financial crimes that are carried out by fraudsters, including phony investments, phone and gift card scams, lottery scams, grandparent scams, Medicare and Social Security scams. I'm going to stop there because if I read all the scams, I would completely fill up the Fraud Talk Tuesday and probably the rest of the day.
Right.
I'm also going to mention romance scams, which we covered in the January Fraud Talk Tuesdays, or being taken advantage of by a trusted friend or relative. There's literally no limit on how creative those who wish to steal can be. So
And
today,
if I could just jump in here for 20 seconds. We were just talking before we went live. 30 minutes ago, it happened to me on a phone call that I received, that somebody called me, and you caught me and you said that I had made a mistake. And when you started to say that, I said, you're right, I did, and how to respond to them. So it happens to all of us, and it happens every single day.
And I want to also mention that my husband and I, who consider ourselves extremely savvy people, and I don't even want to tell you how many graduate degrees we have between the two of us, were scammed, which is one of the reasons why I decided to become a fraud fighting volunteer. So, yeah. Right. Okay. So experts broadly define elder financial exploitation as the theft or misuse of an older person's money or property by someone they know. So this can include embezzlement, falsifying records, fraudulent property transfers, denial of access to records. And one thing about this is that it's vastly underreported. Why? Elders who have been taken advantage of are embarrassed that they weren't able to prevent the fraud. And this is across all kinds of frauds and not just elders. Fraud in general is vastly underreported. And if the perpetrator is a family member, a relative, or a friend, elders may be hesitant to report because they don't want to expose people who they know and thought they trusted. And finally, unfortunately, sometimes elder financial exploitation isn't discovered until the estate is settled. And here in Massachusetts, there's a 3-year statute of limitations for reporting this type of crime. So nationally, studies have shown that only 1 in 23 cases of elder financial exploitation is reported. So this really is the tip of the iceberg. Okay, after all that discouraging words, now some good news, which is that in most cases, the abuse can be prevented before it starts. So we're going to now talk about discussing, steps that you can take to protect yourself or a vulnerable loved one from financial exploitation.
Right, right. Let's move along. So Alice, who is typically responsible for exploiting seniors?
Well, I think this is the most heartbreaking part of this. Financial exploitation can sometimes come from those closest to us. Family, friends, and caregivers may skim a little money here or there for their own purchases. Sometimes elder financial exploitation starts small, with the exploiter testing to see if it was noticed by anybody before going after bigger assets. They can also use a person's assets, such as vehicles, vacation homes, or credit cards irresponsibly, manipulate their estate plan to increase their share, or just brazenly stealing large sums of money, thinking no one will notice. More often than not, if the victim knows the exploiter, it's a family member. And we're not talking about small sums of money in most cases. The average amount lost per victim is 34,000. And remember, that's 1 in 23. So the true average amount is probably a great deal more. If the person exploiting the elder is acting as a fiduciary, which is fiduciary means that you have the person's best financial interests at heart, then it can be even more dangerous because they can use a legal document like power of attorney or a trust to access someone's finances. And for those cases, the average amount lost skyrockets to 83,000. And unfortunately, the older the victim, the greater the average amount of stolen assets.
Yeah, and the fiduciaries, it'll be held to a higher standard as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Financial exploitation can also range from stealing someone's social security check, forging financial documents, misappropriating cash, jewelry, or other assets. And from 2020 to 2022, nationally, the cost of elder financial exploitation grew by over 54%. In Massachusetts, over 6,000 cases were reported, which resulted in $232 million in losses. And we know, again, that the actual amount is much higher.
Right, right. What are some of the signs and circumstances that can help you spot elder financial abuse, and possibly prevent it from happening to someone you know or someone you deeply love?
Okay, number 1, start with unusual financial activity. A major red flag of potential financial abuse is unexplained activities in an older person's financial accounts. Now, to identify potential financial abuse, you need access to the older person's accounts. So you may need to consult with an estate planner or attorney on the best way to have access to the person's accounts. And you may need to be prepared to have a sensitive discussion on why it's in the best interest of your loved one for you to access their accounts. They may see it as losing control or giving in to getting old, and sometimes enlisting the support of their doctor or another trusted professional can be helpful. Once you are able to access their accounts, you want to inquire about large withdrawals, unpaid bills, and make sure that there's no questionable credit card charges. You should consider stopping any bank transfers or recurring transactions that the account holder doesn't recall making. And obviously, all of us forget things from time to time, including older Americans. But what should set off alarm bells are major financial dealings that they have no memory of requesting, authorizing, or if they have difficulty explaining it. You also want to periodically review your loved one's bank and credit card statements with them. And let me also mention that everyone should be reviewing their bank and credit card statement on a regular basis. I have a relative who just had unauthorized transactions from his account, and luckily he reviews it and saw it right away. If possible, create a transparent system that allows both of you to monitor the financial activities and perform basic record keeping and keep the lines of communication over money matters open.
So besides financial activity, what else should we be watchful of?
Okay, another area of concern is new friends or helpers. Individuals who live alone may be particularly susceptible to financial exploitation, and wrongdoers can more readily hide their misdeeds if no one else is around. Experts caution that perpetrators of financial abuse, especially newer acquaintances, frequently try to box out others and limit relatives' contact with a vulnerable older adult. The new acquaintance can also be a relative or close family member, which may complicate getting to the bottom of the situation. So, a family member that wasn't always involved and all of a sudden is very involved. Isolation is the number one tip-off. It can be very subtle. A new friend may try to cut off the family from getting access to the senior. Suddenly, this friend is saying the elder person's not available, they're taking a nap, they're not feeling well right now. They say they'll have them call back later, they never do. And you want to be especially wary of newcomers who put themselves into the older person's life in a way that makes the new associate indispensable in the eyes of the victim. Many schemers are initially incredibly helpful in order to build trust. So they might take the senior to the store, to the doctor's appointments, restaurants, and of course, most importantly, they're running them over to the bank.
Tell us, does one's cognitive decline, can that play a role in someone becoming more vulnerable?
Yes. If an older person has cognitive impairments, such as Alzheimer's or another form of dementia, they may be beginning to show a loss of judgment, including the ability to manage their finances. When this is observed, a designated family member or other trusted individual may need to immediately step in to help. When my mom, who always balanced her checkbook to the penny, started asking for help, a big red flag was raised in my mind. Once cognitive decline starts, it can accelerate very quickly, and unscrupulous family members, neighbors, or friends may try to exert influence over people with cognitive issues and take advantage of their loss of judgment, which is just like, that's the most heartbreaking thing. People living with dementia may lose the ability to differentiate between those who have their best interests and those who are just pretending to put them first. And financial fraud can occur easily when a third party has access to an older adult's sensitive private data, account numbers, passwords, social security numbers. Many older people do need help with money management tasks, which could be from simple bill paying to buying groceries, but their financial details should be closely guarded and only provided when necessary to known trusted individuals. And this requires close and constant oversight. Let me also mention, I had an appointment this morning earlier before this session, and I told the person I was seeing what I was going to be talking about. And she said that her mother had a caregiver who took care of her for 2 years and was very responsible, and then started stealing. So this person was really playing the long game. So just remember that. I mean, often we think the best predictor of the future is the past, but in this case, maybe not.
She was softening her up. I guess so. In addition to cognitive issues, Alice, as we age, some people experience mobility and physical issues. How does that play into the exploitation?
Well, even those without cognitive impairments may be susceptible to financial abuse if they have physical disabilities or any other issues that prevent them from driving or getting around. So if they can't get to the bank on their own, that can present a problem. Or if they're not good with computers or don't have the technological know-how to do remote banking. So if they're relying on another person to handle routine banking transactions, such as deposits, withdrawals, or transfers, that again, that's an opportunity for exploitation. One thing to think about is considering setting up an automatic bill pay for your loved one's regularly recurring bills like cell phone, utilities, insurance, rent, mortgage. If people with cognitive or physical impairments are left to figure out how to pay their own bills, it increases the risk of scam and fraud.
Right, right. What do you do if financial exploitation happens to you or a loved one, or maybe even just a very close friend? What steps should be taken?
So when exploitation is suspected, you can take steps to assist authorities with their roles in investigating and prosecuting the perpetrator. The state attorney general's office is a great place to start. And in Massachusetts, an elder abuse report can be filed 24 hours a day, either online or by phone. There's also a link on the slide that we'll share at the end. And let me also mention that in addition to financial exploitation, elder abuse can also include physical abuse, sexual, emotional abuse, caretaker neglect, and self-neglect. You need to talk to the person victimized who may not know about the exploitation. And let me just say a word here from my experience on the Fraud Watch helpline. Often loved ones mean well when they have the conversation, but they take a sort of victim blaming approach. How could you be so stupid? How could you let this happen? And it's one of the reasons why people who have been victimized by scammers are reluctant to tell friends and family. So remember that you want to not blame the victim and have a supportive, direct, but use a kind approach. I'm so sorry this happened. You're up against a criminal. What can we do together? As opposed to sort of, blaming the person,
Yeah, nobody wants to be thought of as stupid.
really. And one thing I want to mention is that in my role on the Fraud Watch helpline, I talk to people from all walks of life who have been victimized by scammers. I mean, I have talked to doctors, lawyers, college professors, sophisticated people who have been victimized by criminals. And in many cases, this is a very seasoned criminal who's used their techniques in many places. So you really want to, as you're talking to the person, remember that it isn't their fault. You want to notify the authorities. This is a great place to get law enforcement involved, follow their instructions, let other family members know. You want to notify financial advisors who may be able to put a freeze on their accounts. And if the exploitation is the result of cognitive decline, gather records, medical records, facilities that they've been to, prescriptions, because that will be very useful to provide the earliest record of when the person being victimized began to experience some of the decline. Document the victim's interactions with the suspect. For example, did the suspect make any promise, encourage the victim to give the money? Secure all documents that they gave the victim, like an insurance application, an investment flyer. If the victim can make a recorded or written and signed statement about that, capture it now. Don't let details get forgotten. Make notes that will help investigators identify the suspect. Physical description, make and model of their car, contact information. And then meet with an attorney who can discuss your legal options regarding potential guardianship or conservatorship if the victim really lacks the ability to handle their own affairs, and determine ways to have the suspect removed as a power of attorney, guardian, or trustee. And of course, I can't help but giving a pitch for the AARP Fraud Watch helpline. We're going to have the number at the end, and this is a great resource for anybody who's been victimized, friends or family, and you don't have to be a member of AARP, and you do not have to be a senior to call into the Fraud Watch helpline.
You're shameless with giving that pitch. These are some tremendous tips. What can we do to prevent exploitation from happening in the first place?
Number one, stay in touch with older ones. How many of us have lost connections with others because of move, retirement, death of a spouse, family member? One of the greatest risk factors for elder financial exploitation is social isolation, whether it's due to life circumstance or physical distance. And losing connections is one of those things that can really happen with aging. So we want to maintain close contact with our older loved ones, visits, phone, video, emails, text, if they can use that technology, and encourage them to stay involved with others. It can be a faith community, volunteer activities. Whenever I speak at senior centers on fraud, often there's a lunch ahead of time, and I often go, sort of stop in the lunch and tell people, and I realize it's such a great community, and you can see that there's some really close connections. Second, watch out for someone, even if you thought you or your loved ones could trust, who discourages contact with family and friends, exerts pressure on financial decisions, or asks for lots of money. The National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life reports that a typical scheme is where someone befriends an older person, becomes part of their life, and grooms them so that when they ask the older person for money, they'll feel comfortable giving it. People who are on the prey for the elderly are always looking for vulnerabilities, a situation, or an opening that they can exploit to take advantage of an older person more easily and quickly. It's up to us not to let this happen by paying attention to the relationships in the older person's life.
Right. Nobody likes to be alone. Do you have any thoughts about caregivers?
Yeah, really quick. If an older person has caregivers and outsiders who have access to their home daily or 24/7, this can really increase the risk. If you hire someone for in-home help, strongly consider going through a bonded agency that does rigorous screening. The person I saw earlier this morning, the person taking care of her mother, was a good friend of a good friend. Well, guess what? That didn't stop the person from being a thief. If there is any case of theft, be sure to contact the authorities. Also, just observe how the caregiver is taking care of your loved ones. Are they keeping them clean, stocking the refrigerator with healthy food? The other thing is the caregiver is much less likely to exploit your loved one if they know you're paying close attention and auditing what they do. So you should be doing that even if you completely trust the person, that's important.
Right. Any final thoughts, Alice?
These crimes are preventable. Seniors can protect themselves and their savings by being careful with whom they interact on the internet, being skeptical of strangers. And even though it's sad to think of people that exploiting a senior, just being aware of it, the fact that you've come to this session today is really important. And when you suspect a loved one has fallen prey to a scam or fraud, resist the urge to assign blame. Manipulators and criminals are really good at what they do. If red flags are waving, get organized, be proactive, and move forward to help hold wrongdoers accountable. And we hopefully can put some bad people in jail.
Put both fraudsters in jail. Alice, thank you. This is tremendous information. Let's check for any questions and before we share the resource slide. Who we got down there, Dennis? What do we got?
Have any questions, but if people have questions, encourage them to put them into the Q&A. We can probably answer them or give them guidance as to where they should go for information. I'm going to share the slide for the resources in a second here.
Do any of our participants have any questions they'd like to share or ask? There's one just popped up. How do we get a power of attorney? Alice, would you like to weigh in on that?
Well, that is something where you want to contact an attorney about it.
Right. Yeah, power of attorney doesn't necessarily mean it has to be an attorney.
Right.
It's somebody you trust to oversee your affairs if you
I mean,
become.
often, it's really helpful to have an elder care attorney because they're very savvy
Right.
about that. And also many of the senior centers have once every 2 weeks an attorney who comes by and provides pro bono legal services. So before
Right.
you go out, just look at your local senior center and see, do they have an attorney? And often there's a regular schedule every 2 weeks or once a month where an attorney comes by that can be helpful.
Yeah, somebody they trust and can handle their affairs. Right. Any other questions? What do you do if your elder has a neighbor who is so nice and helpful, but your elder is giving her money and doesn't believe she's being taken advantage of?
Yeah, this is the most heartbreaking situation. And, this is one of the things that is the hardest thing to do. But I would probably go have a very direct conversation with the person to let them know you're aware of what's going on. I would not hesitate to involve local law enforcement. Now,
Right,
sometimes people think, oh my gosh, I'm not going to call the police. Yeah, go file a non-emergency police report.
right,
And if you need to, you can probably have a local policeman go and meet with the person. And the other thing is that's what the elder, reporting elder fraud, that's the place to do it. I mean, you let the person, you go have a conversation, ask what's going on, listen to their side of it, and then you basically tell them either it stops immediately or this is what I'm gonna do.
right. I had an older neighbor I was visiting with several years ago. She 90, 90. We're talking, and she was telling me she was complaining about her bank account. She was missing several $100s, and she couldn't understand why. I said, I said, you need to talk to, she had a couple of boys. You need to talk to your kids. Go see, oh, she's railing about her kids that they don't pay her attention, this, that, and the other thing. So she had me call her bank. So that immediately puts the bank on high alert because I'm not a family member. And it's between a rock and a hard place. I said, here, talk to the bank. She's very much aware. They talked to her and they reminded her that she had transferred money from one account to another account to prepay one of her bills that was due. So she had completely forgotten that she had pre-authorized the transfer of funds out of a savings account to a checking account. And that led to her
Yeah.
being,
Alice, you
It's
want to go over the slide for a minute? And
Yeah, so what's on the slide, we have contact information for the US Justice Department website. We recommend that everybody do a credit check, and you can either do an alert or a credit freeze. And what that means is no one will be able to use your you or the elder's personal information to open up a credit card. If you do think there's a chance of identity theft, identitytheft.gov is a great website. And then the AARP Fraud Watch Network, which is an incredible resource. That website has a list of, I don't know, at least 80 different kinds of fraud. And then finally, this is the phone number, 877-908-3360 for the Fraud Watch Network helpline. It's open from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, 5 days a week. We get 400 calls a day. And then Dennis is also going to add to this contact information for the Attorney General's office in Massachusetts, because I mentioned that as well.
we'll be sending this out along with the link to this recording. Oh, Jim, you're on mute.
there we are, I'm sorry. We have more questions coming in. Will you send the resource slide with the links and attend to the attendees? Yes, we are, correct?
Yes.
Yep, we are. And the elder is very proud and will not allow family to take control of their finances. How do you convince them, Alice?
Oh, that could be a whole other session, and we're at time, but all I can say is often it can be helpful to bring in a trusted other person. So if there's anyone as part of a faith community, sometimes law enforcement can be brought in, a doctor, a trusted advisor. I'll stop there because I know we're at time and I want to be sure that we're respectful of people's time.
And one more thing, it may take baby steps to do this, step by
Right.
step, before you can finally get them to be convinced that there's a problem.
One last question, solo agers, what do they do?
Say it again?
One last question, solo agers, somebody that's on their own, what do they do?
Well, that, obviously that's the most vulnerable population. So,
Right.
it's that's exactly what we're talking about. The more solo you are and the less connected you are, the more
Right.
vulnerable you are to
vulnerable.
scams.
Absolutely, right, okay. Panelist, good job. See you in a
Listen,
month.
keep yourself and your loved ones safe.
Exactly.